guys, where's Doc? Because we're going to be talking about this DeLorean, VIN 4462.
Welcome back to Afternoon Garage. Different car in the shop today. We all know what this is. This is my 1981 DeLorean. I got this DeLorean October 2015, not too long ago. I made about 7,999 of these things. I don't know. It's close to 8,000. You can tell what year of production and kind of when things happened. They didn't change a whole lot throughout the years. They had, some of them had a gas flap in the hood. Some of them had different color wheels. The trim was just a slightly different color, but really, it didn't really change too much throughout the years. Mine is VIN 4462, so if you look at that, that's probably right in the middle of the production run in 1981, late 1981, so it does not have a gas flap, and it had the darker silver wheels. I was looking all over for one of these things for a few years, and actually had somebody pull one into my driveway one day, and I got to drool all over it for, I don't know, half an hour, and I had to have one. They didn't really build too many of these, 8,000. That's not too many of them. So usually you want to make a return on something, well, you'd buy something that they didn't build too many of. And this car fits that bill. Paid almost $20,000 for this car. This car did not run right, but one of the things about these cars is the corrosion on the frame. The way this vehicle is built is it has kind of an X chassis, and then it has a fiberglass tub on it, and then these stainless steel panels here. So the whole car is not stainless, just the exterior. The same people that would come out and repair the dents in your refrigerator probably could be successful at something like this. The metal X frame is coated in epoxy. And when you leave these things outside, that epoxy kind of starts to flake off a little bit, and then what you get is you get a moisture developing in between the metal and the epoxy, and the whole frame comes apart, and in fact it'll actually rust out and rust through. And the thing is that the epoxy actually made the problem worse because it trapped the moisture in between the metal and the epoxy coating itself, and it just kind of did its work in there. And man, I'll tell you what, when I got mine, I wanted to make sure mine was free of any kind of problems like that. So I crawled underneath it immediately. It's the first thing I did. And well, this is what I saw. Starting at the front and working our way back. See, that looks pretty good. There's the fiberglass tubs here. If somebody hits something with these going down the road, you'll see these will start to crack in here. The frame looked pretty good. No real rust that I could see. Just some little surface rust here and there where maybe some of the bolts were coming through, but nothing real serious. So I was a buyer at that point. Rented a U-Haul and I drug the car home. Here's a picture of the car as I got it. Stock springs are USA spec. They're tall for the US markets, and I think it's because of bumper height matching. They had to jack the front end up so that the DOT, it would be DOT approved for our roads. I think it looks really silly. One of the first things I did before even getting it running right, well, I took a turn and a half out of the front coil springs and brought it down, made it look a little bit better. Tires were really bad on this thing too, so I knew that I had to replace the tires. These kind of tires are difficult to get because they're 14-inch on the front and 15-inch on the rear, and they just don't make sizes like that anymore. The DeLorean wheels are staggered as well, so narrower on the front, wider on the rear. Very few wheels have the look of the iconic DeLorean turbine wheels. I think they look really good when they're painted silver, and there's actually been some prototypes that were made of some newer style wheels that were, I think they were 18-inch. You can put some newer tires on those things, and boy, I'd like to have a set of those. Those are custom cut wheels, and they are thousands of dollars. I think the car looks fantastic with those on it. I took this wheel that I found, I color matched the front and rear fascias to match the wheel. So all I did was I took it into the paint store. I said, hey, give me something close to this gunmetal color that I have on here. And they were able to mix me up something in a single stage paint that looks pretty good, I think. So here's the wheel I chose. I kind of like it. It kind of has a mesh style pattern. It's kind of later, and this is that gunmetal that I had color matched. I was able to take a image of these wheels and stick them on the DeLorean, and they look pretty good, so I went with them. When I put these on, the offset was incorrect. So I had to add a wheel spacer, not to adapt the lug pattern, the 4x100 lug pattern, but to get it out an inch so it'd be flush with the bodywork. The rear hub bore of the DeLorean is 72 millimeters, and the adapters are made with a 67 millimeter hole. So I had to send those out to a machine shop and get just 2 millimeters ground off the inside so I could fit these wheel adapters onto this and have it be hub centric. I did keep the original wheels for the car, and you can see right there's a whole bunch of rash on these things. So I'm going to be refinishing these in a future episode of Afternoon Garage. After I got the stance and the wheels and tires replaced, I was able to paint these parts here, once again matching to the gunmetal on the wheels. And one thing about these cars to note is that there's a high beam and a low beam here on either side. And with the regular halogen high beams, I think they were 55, 65 watt for the high beams. What happened is the halogen bulbs, they're incandescent and they would heat up. And what would happen is that if you drove with your headlights on high beam for an extended period of time, what you'll start getting is this will start to melt right here. And it'll actually start to kind of come up and look like looks like the car's kind of confused. When I bought this car, I was extremely happy. Didn't have this problem. Mine are completely straight, and the repair for those seems to be taking the plastic fascia off, putting some kind of stiffener in there. I was happy I didn't have to go down that avenue. So at this point, I had a driveway queen. The thing didn't run very well. And it seems to me that if you ask questions in the DeLorean community, they'll always refer you to that shop manual. You should be knowing how to read and understand that shop manual in order to understand what's going on in your car. Had all kinds of problems, but really what the big problem was with this car was the fuel system. These cars are known for having rubber parts in the fuel tank. The rubber parts come apart after some time, and I think that's probably a result of all the alcohol in the fuel nowadays. Deteriorates the rubber, and then you get stuff floating around the entire fuel system. This fuel system is a Bosch K Jetronic system. These were installed in the earlier 911s. Mercedes had them. A lot of the European cars were after this mechanical fuel injection at the time, which was good. I mean, it performed really well, but if you stopped driving the vehicle, there were too many cast iron parts and metal parts within the system, especially with the ethanol and the fuel that they're using nowadays. It would rust up, especially if you had maybe like a leaky injector or something that would evacuate the entire fuel system when you shut the car off. You were in trouble because the fuel distributor would rust up. The fuel distributor on these is not rebuildable by normal people, although if you do it enough times you can get it sealed up right. So let's have a look. This is a 2.9 liter PRV engine. P stands for Peugeot, R stands for Renault, V stands for Volvo. Nothing special here about the horsepower. Horsepower ratings for this are about 130. I am still at a loss why they call this the DMC-12, because everybody thinks that, man, it's a 12? Must have a lot of power. It's a 2.9 liter, 130 horsepower, 6-cylinder. Don't let anybody fool you with that. These engines are pretty reliable. There's your fuel distributor right there. I had to replace all of these lines with stainless steel lines. These were originally rubber, and of course the rubber comes apart. There's a warm-up regulator down in here, and fuel distributor here, and then lines going out to each individual injector. I gotta tell you that I learned a lot by working on this injection system. It's nothing like the electromechanical solenoid type activated fuel injectors they have nowadays. It's nothing like it at all. There's no way to actually fire the injectors. The injectors are fired based upon pressure alone. The theory of how it works is completely different than anything else I've ever encountered. Those Germans have a way of inventing stuff that works really well, but I had to get a whole new vocabulary of what these parts were actually called, and I was really confused at the time, and I was actually kind of thinking that I was in the Twilight Zone for a minute because nothing really was making any sense as far as how this works. So one of the things that is really critical with these engines is there's really no way to test the injectors individually. They kind of have to be tested in the system hooked up to the fuel distributor you plan to use. So what I ended up doing was I got a bunch of little small containers. Well, they ended up being empty Pepsi bottles. And then manually commanded the fuel to start spraying in these bottles. And then I was able to measure and see exactly what injector was low, the spray patterns. One problem is that they don't make parts for this anymore. So the injectors that you find out in the market that you purchase may not even really be that good. I purchased a set of injectors off of eBay, and they were worse than the ones that I had. They probably failed a flow test somewhere or another. Somebody bundled them up in a group of 6, $50 a piece, and sold them to me. And man, they were garbage, every one of them. So I ended up getting a good set from Rock Auto, and shortly after I did, they ran out of stock of those things. So there's rebuild services for these, but the problem with the injectors, the mechanical fuel injectors, is there's little fine, tiny screens in there that are made out of metal. If the fuel distributor starts rusting up and it sends crap into the little fine screens into the fuel injectors, it may not make it to the pintle valve where it's actually sprayed. It'll definitely start corroding that screen, and by then you have a completely clogged injector. It's almost impossible to flush the fuel system by working on this car piece by piece by piece. You almost have to take the entire fuel system apart and flush it, rebuild it, and install it with fresh injectors. That is the only way that I've come across that you're going to end up with success first time out with cleaning one of these fuel systems up. The whole key to these cars, you have to drive it. If you don't drive this car and you let it sit, it's going to come apart on you. A year later, I got the car running the way it was supposed to. Starts every time now, starts when cold. I have a few issues here and there. I don't really know if you're ever able to repair and fix every single problem you're going to have with one of these things. I did some things in the interior. Let's check that out. The seats on this car were in great shape. There was really nothing wrong with those. Carpet was in good shape. I had to get some new floor mats, change the steering wheel here, put in a tablet. I got the time circuits on there. And those illuminate. And then, of course, the flux capacitor. You gotta have one of those. My dash is kind of coming apart a little bit in the center. I'm gonna probably pull that out eventually and do something with that. Overall, interior's in great shape. For the stereo now, I took and I went with Rockford Fosgate all the way around. I used their 5-channel amp, their speakers in the front and rear. Done a lot of cool things with this car. One of the things you can do with a DeLorean is have a really good Halloween. Kind of crashed a few Halloween parties about a year after I got it. I actually bought it in October around Halloween time, and I thought I would be able to get it going. And car shows are great because people really kind of identify, they know what it is. They come up to it, they ask you lots of questions. Gives you an opportunity to network with some people who aren't really interested in necessarily cars, but they can recognize this car. You aren't really necessarily going to win any awards for something like this, but it sure is a conversation piece. I have a few more things I want to do to this car. I want to change that grill out underneath. It's kind of like a hardware cloth, kind of a mesh thing, and mine is split completely. I just want to make it look flush, like it's not even there. Another thing I want to do is I put underbody lights on it, and those didn't fare too well over time, so I'm going to be replacing those. I'm also going to get into the clutch system a little bit. It has this has a 5-speed manual gearbox. The slave cylinder is in a very bad position in the rear where it can take lots of corrosion. It gets lots of water down inside of there. So we'll pull that out, maybe look at that a little bit. Car's in pretty good shape. I'll do a few things here and there and make it much better than it was yesterday. Overall, I've really enjoyed my ownership of this car. I've learned a lot of things about European cars. Learned a lot of things about how production cars can be made and maybe shouldn't be made. But you know what? I think it's a fantastic car to own for a low production car. It was a nightmare. But it's fixed now, and it's well worth it. Till next time, remember, you can do all things.